Okay, here we are at the end of turn 10. So it's the end of the 11th of July, and the Russians are in a fair bit of trouble. This is the, the main area of issue. Basically, the Germans have that little sort of poke in the line here. The Russians tried to pull back, but the Germans sort of shifted along the south here. They've come across the river. You can see so the advanced elements of 11th Panzer down here, and a motorized division spreading around here. So the effect of this is to basically pocket a couple of Russian units around here. There's some pockets down here. Tarnopol is at risk of being cut off, and Germans, this is after the Russian reaction, so this is after the Russian turn. And yeah, a lot of units, a lot of Russians behind the line here which couldn't get out. The Russians have, some of them have managed to sort of pull back to here, but it's a scattering of units. They don't have a good defense anymore in this area, and this is basically just where they could get to try to stop that German advance. Tarnopol is very weakly defended. It looks like a big stack, but there's not a lot there. But yeah, around here you've got Panzer Division, the SS units, and two motorized divisions exploiting and really harassing the Russians as they try to form a decent defensive position. We're out into sort of open terrain now. A lot of road networks around here, so it's pretty good for the Russians, for the Germans to just harass those Russians. You can just see immediately what's going to happen here. This unit here, for example, can come across here and cut off Tarnopol. So yeah, big problems for the Russians. They are trying to pull back, just not able to do so in time. And yeah, several divisions and brigades caught behind the lines. Around the south here, pretty quiet. The Russians again trying to pull back away from here, trying to save their units before they all get cut off. And the Germans have crossed the river here, the Dniester River here, just with a little bridgehead across there. It's not a sustainable bridgehead. They will need to shift to the north to capture that the key town there. But they're also sort of pushing out to the east as well, and again threatening to cut off some Russians. So the Russians now, with all the problems going on here, they're trying to shift their forces up and around. So they've pulled back out of this area and trying to reform along the northern edge. Way up in the north, so things were pretty quiet along here, but way up in the north, the Germans have pushed up and around. So there's some Russian defenses along that river. The Germans decided to push north briefly, and they've swung around, and they're going to try to hit them. Once now they've crossed that river, they can swing around to the south and try and hit them from that northern flank. And they've got three Panzer divisions and a motorized division up there, and a lot of infantry mopping up in the rear. So there were some Russians pocketed here, Germans mopping up here. But yeah, the general, it's amazing how the course of this campaign has changed. 3 turns ago, the Germans were just butting their heads against the wall, couldn't do anything. Just that little bit of pressure, and just some subtle cracks in those Russian defenses has kind of, I guess, knocked the door in, and the Russians are desperate to try to retreat and reform their line and stop. The Germans seem to have a bit of a roll on, and every turn they're able to sort of get through these Russian lines. And the Russians always face this choice. They can always, for example, here the Russians could have tried to cut off. They could advance west a little bit and try to cut off these motorized divisions, but that just exposes that unit that tries to make that move, and it makes the situation even worse. Their priority is at present not suffering, not getting out of supply, not being pocketed, and trying to survive basically. So again, this is the end of the 10th turn. We're heading into turn 11, but the Russians will need to rally. Just look at their reinforcement schedule. They don't have a lot coming on. Yeah, they're in a bit of trouble. They've lost a heck of a lot of casualties, And that's really what it comes down to. That's why there are these gaps. That's why there are these cracks, is because 3, 4, 5 turns ago, they could sustain a solid straight line, and they just don't have the strength to do that anymore. So heading into turn 11, I'll report back soon. All right, this is now the situation at the end of the 11th turn. It is the end of the 13th of July, and it's a mud turn. So German momentum is basically brought to a halt. It is so hard to move through these mud turns, and the Russians breathe a sigh of relief. It gives them the opportunity to pull back a little bit further, reform their line. They're trying to get into these defensive positions along the river. Things are looking pretty good. Pretty solid line along here. Very solid line up here in the north. The Germans attacked but failed. They've been mopping up with their infantry behind the line. So these panzer divisions are kind of isolated and can't get attack supply. So this is an out of attack supply, attack. Another out of attack supply attack down here was successful, but the Russians have pulled back to a decent line. An attack on Ternopil was, I think it caused a hit, but that was about it. Cleaning up behind the lines as well. And yeah, the line's now connecting with the Romanians down in the south here, who the Russians, though, have pulled away voluntarily behind this major river, the Dniester River. A couple of them caught behind the line, untried units basically. But for the most part, yeah, the Russians forming a new defensive position along here, stretching north. And look, it looks okay. The Germans, I don't think they'll have the potential to break through here next turn. Ternopil behind the lines. Lack of supplies is going to make any action out here difficult. Pretty solid lines out here. Headquarters well placed in reserve. Yeah. Down in the south here, the Germans failed. We revealed an untried unit, which was a 3 defense unit, one of the strongest. Some mopping operations behind the line. Mud turn, just not much movement happening. An attack out in the east was unsuccessful as well. I think it may have caused... That was a no result, I think. But otherwise, it's really just the Germans squelching through the mud, trying to advance 1 or 2 hexes. A couple more if they're using primary roads, but not a lot happening. These mud turns basically just bring everything to a halt, and the Russians pull back and, yeah, create these gaps. And that's about it. So, as I said, it's the end of the 11th turn, about to head into the 12th turn. Okay, so here we are at the end of turn 12, and the Russians are really struggling to find an answer to this German offensive. You may recall the Russians formed this solid line up here in the north. They had 2 Panzer divisions up here. Basically, the Germans see this line, and they've got 2 choices. They can try and butt their heads against this line. They may get lucky, or they can just pull back and away and find somewhere else to go. And that's just what they've done. You can see the 2 Panzer divisions that were in here are just relocating around to the south, where the Russians don't have a strong defensive line. So the Russians put a lot of effort into this line. Strong points, bring up their headquarters, they've got reserves, even a stockpile of supplies for a counterattack, and the Germans say, no, we're going to pull back around here and target your weaker defences over here. What do we got here? We've got the 13th Panzer Division and the 25th Motorised. They were around here. Again, they just swung around, pushed through this gap, and forcing the Russians to pull back. Not much combat going on. There are not many attacks anywhere around this area. It's just German manoeuvres and being able to wind their way around the Russian positions. They are a bit of a problem here. 13th Panzer has kind of stretched a bit out too far, and the Russians have been able to respond. No counterattacks, but there are supply issues now for the 13th Panzer. Yeah, they could be in trouble, but of course we've got these 2 Panzer divisions up here in the north, which can help them out, and I'm sure the Germans will find a way to relieve that supply situation. They'll probably just ignore it and drive straight towards towards the east. Centre here, the Russians forming a decent... They've pulled back in a hurry, forming an adequate... This is not really a defensive line, it's just where they've been able to retreat to. In the south, they're trying to form a defensive line. You can see this line they formed along here, trying to stop the SS and 2 motorised divisions pushing up through here. Romanians taking a while to catch up, difficult terrain for them down in the south, a lot of Russians surrendering behind the lines. Out in the east, the Russians launched a counterattack. So they brought a lot of this armour into this area to strike at the 9th Panzer Division down here. And they rolled a 10 on combat, which forced them to retreat. Luckily they suffered, I think they suffered 1 step loss maybe, but yeah, it failed. And they've moved back in to contain that division, but I don't think it'll last for long. Yeah, out in the east, some German elements have really pushed far across the Dniester River. This was a bit of a gamble. It basically forces the Russians to respond, which they have done with a bit of cavalry and some light, some infantry regiments down here. It's not a serious threat. They're only kind of 1 defense strength engineers and some assault guns who can move quite quickly. But the Russians basically have to respond to this threat. Elsewhere along here, everything's pretty quiet. Germans launched an attack here, which didn't go very well. The Russians withdrew. No major kind of operations going on over here. So in terms of that earlier strategy that I talked about, the possibility of driving towards Odessa, you can see we're kind of focusing our resources up in this area, putting a lot of pressure on the Russians. They're really stretched out along here. They're under these strong points, but I can tell you there's not a lot of strength under those strong points. They're not particularly strong defensive positions. And the Germans are across the Dniester here. There is, a crossing there that they can get across. Supplies are getting pretty close to the front with these railheads. A bit of a dump back here, which needs to move up a bit, but yeah. So a dry weather turn, I'll point out as well. This gives the Germans a lot of movement. And you can just look at the next turn. You can see they've got opportunities for offensive activities. This is a very vulnerable Russian position. These hexes here, yes, there's a fortified belt there, but the Germans can easily slip around behind that and hit those units behind the belt. Still cleaning up around here, and Dubno, perhaps, this objective here, still held by the Russians. So, yeah, that's the situation at the end of the 12th turn, the 15th of July, heading into turn 13. I guess the Russians are just hoping they can slow down, try and find every time they build a wall of defences that the Germans just sneak through, and really rapid movement rates. Reconnaissance units have a movement rate of 9. This unit down here, they can just move so fast, and it forces this response. Even without attacking, it forces the Russians to respond to this. We'll see how this gamble pays off in the next turn. I'll report back soon on what happens over the coming turns.